Today's guest is Meslissa Russiano, who is a firecracker who wakes up stuck and stagnant people through coaching, training, speaking, and all-around motivation. She provides a unique approach with clients that pulls in her clinical expertise, directed coaching skills, as well as life experience to reach individuals on a deep and transformational level. Ultimately, her passion is inspiring fierce curiosity and empowering high achievers to slow down, breathe, and enjoy their perfectly imperfect adventure of life. Meslissa,
Mhm.
thank you very much for being here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. And definitely, even from that intro, we very much align with regards to what it is that we try to
Mhm.
do in the world. So I'm excited for what is about to emerge here. But I'd love for you to just break down for us, like the
Mhm.
context, right? Like how you got to doing what you're doing.
Mhm.
Give us the backstory on all of that.
Absolutely. Everyone has that backstory. And I initially went to college to be an orthopedic surgeon, and I went to college in Southern California. And the beach was a little bit more interesting than Chem Lab. And so, confluence of an amazing academic advisor was able to pivot to wanting to do medical social work so I could be in a hospital. And that just cultivated into getting a master's in clinical therapy. And to be honest, I couldn't imagine doing anything else with my life. So started that career like anyone else who's had a master's in psychology or clinical social work. Did the agency thing, worked myself up to an executive director position, was running a company with 115 people, and was looking at it going, oh my gosh, like, is this what I've worked so hard for? Um, is this where I want to be? Is this my impact on the world? And at that point, one of my physicians said, well, if you're unhappy, we can look at Prozac. And I looked at him and I was like, Prozac, like, really? And I'm all for medications for the right place, for the right time, for the right people, for the right reasons. I have nothing against psychotropics. I recommend them every day. But my issue was I wasn't being fulfilled in my role. And there's no medication out there that's going to help somebody who's burned out, stressed out, and just completely overwhelmed with life. And at that point, I resigned from my job. I launched my own private practice. I have never looked back since. I wish I would have done it sooner. And through the course of working in private practice and kind of working on me and working through some of those emotions and those feelings, realizing that my sweet spot, my people, so to speak, are those overachievers that are perfectionistic, always want to achieve more, but they're starting to get really crispy, and they maybe are fully burned out, or they're dealing with imposter syndrome, but maybe they're just on that crux of, is where I was at. Is this all my life has to offer? And I can address that through the avenue of clinical therapy. But what I was starting to find was there's a lot of folks that they don't meet that diagnostic criteria to say, hey, I need a therapeutic intervention to start making changes in my life, which is when I started adding coaching into my practice, specifically working with people who are on the crust of being burned out, dealing with the imposter syndrome. Most of them have very high level jobs and they have no clue how to have balance, how to find meaning, and really want to thrive within their life. So that's kind of Meslissa in a nutshell. I also teach graduate school, which I absolutely love because my whole goal is to hopefully impact the next generation to make different choices so they don't get to that space of being burned out in regardless of what field they choose.
That's such a beautiful, well, I mean, first of all, a beautiful summation of everything. I mean, you
Hmm.
got right to the
Hmm.
point of everything, which is always nice. Um, but I think it's also like it's just something that's so needed, right? Like something that
Hmm.
completely and
Hmm.
utterly is all over wherever we look, to the
Hmm.
point where it's like both, shunned and then glorified at the same time as far as
Absolutely.
like
Hmm.
culture, right? So 100% I agree with you that
Hmm.
this is something that is very important.
Hmm.
And just as a side note, like how do you define the difference between like clinical psychology or like clinical work and coaching? Like, well, what's the distinction for you?
Yeah, and that somebody asked me that question recently, is to how do I delineate if, therapy follows very strict state board guidelines, licensing guidelines. I'm one of those, I know therapists don't like the word crazy, but I'm one of the crazy therapists who's like licensed in 6 states because I wanted to expand my reach. And the question was posed of, well, what if somebody contacts you that's not in one of those 6 states? How do you determine? And usually I do that either with a consultation call. Sometimes it's really clear on a consultation call. Sometimes it's after the first session. If somebody is really struggling with a very deep-seated depression and anxiety that has been there historically, maybe low level, maybe that's something that they've dealt with on and off in their life, or has another mental health issue, then I think they do better in a therapeutic environment because you're going to get the holistic experience. What I have found is there's a lot of individuals that are dealing with burnout that once there's work-life balance, once maybe sometimes there's a job change or just a lens change of their job, the symptoms dissipate. And because of that, it's more related to the burnout portion and not to something underlying mental health. And like I said, sometimes it's very blatant. It's very black and white. You can kind of figure it out. Sometimes it's a couple of sessions and then it's like, ooh, okay, yes. Can I wear both hats? Yes, I can, but ethically I can't. And that's not my role. So we either need to pivot and stop and get a therapist on board to support you with that, or we need to shift gears here. But typically, the individuals that have come to me to work specifically on burnout, there hasn't been that underlying mental health component, but there can be. And I think it's really important for any coach, whether you're trained as a clinician or not, to be very cognizant of where's your scope of practice and when do you need that additional support person for that client.
100%. And I couldn't agree more because sometimes, there's just more than you can handle and that's okay. Like it's okay to admit that and ultimately it has to be client centric, right? Like it has to be
correct
about the client getting them better. So I couldn't agree more. So then I'd love to shift gears and look into like, okay, so you have this mass, both depth and breadth of experience, right? There's so much value that you can provide to people. So what is it that's going on in your business right now that kind of brings you here today?
Well, it's interesting. And it's interesting, my response, because one of the things when I committed to doing this with you was committing to be vulnerable and to not put on that smile that I think a lot of folks do when, you're in the role that I'm in, or any helping professional. And as soon as you said, like, you have this breadth and knowledge, and I'm just like, what are you talking about? Like, I just show up and do what I do. Like, as soon as that inner critic kicks in and is just like, I don't know what he's talking about. Like, he must be talking about somebody else because I know I have those abilities. But I think it's the self-doubt that kicks in. But for me, it's been pivoting from therapy to coaching. And to be able to complete that pivot in a very clear way that is really able to articulate the difference, the value, and really kind of standing in that value space of, okay, this is truly the 26 plus years, now that I feel very old, but the 26 plus years of experience, and this is what I'm bringing. And you get the clinic coach kind of approach, but there's a barrier there that for me, that tends to get me to kind of pull back a little bit and not maybe market or articulate as well as I could.
Got it. So knowing what you know,
that makes
100%.
Sense? Okay.
It absolutely makes sense. So knowing what you know and having the experience that you have, if you had to coach yourself, what would you point out?
I think like a lot of therapists and coaches that I have worked with, it comes down to the scarcity mindset, which I really hate trendy words, so I can't believe I just said that, but just of, okay, well, this is a client, like, and I need to have the client because I need to fill my caseload. So like just the fear of not having that next client, that right client, that ideal client. I think that's one. And the second thing I think it boils down to is, I grew up in the nonprofit world and trained as a clinical social worker. So what, I'm going to put this dollar sign on my services? No, you can't put that dollar sign on your services. But the irony in all of that is I pay business coaches, or have historically, and actually have a consult with an amazing coach next week on website design, that I'm paying her twice and then some my rate, and don't blink an eye. So it's like I understand that investment for specific knowledge, but when it comes to me setting prices and following through, it's that worth value connection. And well, you can't charge that. Like, who's going to come? Like, who's going to pay that?
Got it. So clearly, and not surprisingly, this is not your first rodeo diving into, self-awareness and
Right.
self-work, because
Yeah.
that's, again, very well articulated and absolutely makes a
Mhm.
lot of sense. So knowing what you know and having the awareness that you have,
Mhm.
what do you think is the gap for you to act on it to change it?
That is the $1,000,000 question. I think that I've discovered this, maybe not as much from self-awareness and insight, as much from and what was the wedding planner with Jennifer Lopez years ago? I plan, I don't wed. I know that's not the exact quote, but I teach, I don't follow. Is that I have walked so many coaches and clinicians through setting appropriate fees and rates that I haven't followed through on my own. And so I think it's more of a reflective kind of awareness than it is doing like actual work in this area, because there's a barrier of raising those fees. And I had a conversation with my accountant in December, and she looked at some of my sliding scale fees that I had at the time. And oh, she's a little spitfire. And let me tell you the lecture I got. So, but that was the first time I think I had been that transparent with somebody as to really truly how I was undervaluing my services, despite the fact that I coach people into phenomenal practices
Okay.
at such a higher price point.
So if I did charge a higher price point, then fill in the blank.
Then my first thing that came to mind was, then would I be worth it? Or then would they think there was value for that dollar? Or even then, I have to work harder to prove that I'm worth that dollar amount.
Okay. Are any of those true?
In my brain, they're all very true. In actuality, probably no. Okay, so no. But in my brain, I think it's so deeply ingrained of, if you charge this dollar point, you better be a rock star.
Okay.
And
what's
have
the definition of a
rock
therapist
star?
rock star?
Therapist rock star. Like, I think the unrealistic notion, I think, of what people view therapy. I worked with somebody, we had 3 or 4 sessions, a very deep trauma history. She terminated therapy, which doesn't happen frequently. Thankfully, I'm very blessed my clients stick around, but she terminated because she wasn't getting the results fast enough. And this was somebody that was on a reduced fee. And so it was like, that was very reinforcing to that mindset of, if you don't show up and fix their problems, which is not my job. My job is to kind of guide, explore, be curious, empower people to make different choices or evaluate their choices. But the message was, I'm not fixed fast enough. I'm not going to pay half your rate, which is what I was charging her because she was a graduate student. And, I have a soft spot for grad students going into this field.
Got it. So beautiful answer. But it's also a non-answer. Because it was what criteria
Yes.
goes into making a rock star therapist.
Okay. I love blunt. I guess at the end of the day, well, then that's going to be a non-answer too, because I'll talk around that because I'm really good at that. Is really being able to show up, be present, be able to challenge clients on any cognitive distortions that are present. And this is for coaching or therapy, to identify their barriers, to challenge them to work through those barriers. And really, truly what my main goal, and yes, I realize the irony, is that everybody that I work with realizes their internal worth and value right where they're at, regardless of life circumstances, regardless of position, regardless of letters behind their name, that they realize their inherent worth and value so that they can make decisions moving forward based on their core values, based on their worth and value, and so that they can have this life that has balance and meaning and impact, whatever that is for them.
Perfect. So if you were to repeat everything you just said and replace you, them with I, what would it sound like?
That I have worth and value. And that I deserve to live a life in which I thrive and have balance and have meaning, regardless of what I do for a living, how many people I impact, how many letters are behind my name, but that living within my core values and that worth is something that's going to empower me to be the best version of me.
And when you say that, how does that feel inside of your body?
Rehearsed. It wasn't rehearsed, but it feels rehearsed.
Right. It feels fake.
Feels totally fake.
It feels like lip service.
Absolutely.
Okay. So
my hobby right now is called work.
Is that really a hobby, or is that a makeshift hobby?
It's a makeshift hobby.
Right. So what does the lip service awareness or realization, whatever you want to call it, what does that tell you about your inner state, about yourself?
I think I have derived my identity, meaning, worth, and value by the people that I help and impact. And I think it started from a very innocent, organic place. And I think 26 years into this, going through a divorce, being a single mom, raising a daughter 100% on my own, and really kind of morphing through this whole thing, I think it's become a life of its own, that it's my identity now is more connected to my work, which is why I think I have such an impact working with overachievers to get them to disconnect, because I see it so clearly that but that I don't practice what I preach, that my identity is not rooted in me as much as it's rooted in my work, my daughter, and I'm not gonna say my title because I'm not that egotistical, but just what I do.
Right. And would it be safe to say that it's not just your identity that's rooted in all of those things, but also to a large degree, like your significance? Like, this is where I find significance. And
Mhm.
there's a part of me that projects and believes that if I can fix this in other people, then maybe some way, somehow I could also fix it in myself.
So you do replay this on video, or is this just an audio recording? Because
It's both.
I'm about to stick my tongue out at you, because you're 100% correct in that, is that, and I think cognitively, I know what my worth and value is. I know what I stand for. I know my core values. I know all of that. But I think, like I said, what started out very innocently, and then life happened, and then promotions happened, and then I'm a business owner, and now I'm pivoting from a very stable business to a cash-based therapy coaching business, which comes with lots of question marks and fears. That I think through that entire process, my significance has come from watching my clients succeed and thrive.
I would agree with you 100%. And I would also challenge the depth of that, right? So
Okay. Mm-hmm.
rewinding back this
Mm-hmm.
conversation, when I asked you, okay, well, what is the criteria for a rock star therapist?
Mm-hmm.
What you described without ever having, seen you work, but just from the
Mm-hmm.
short conversation that we've
Mm-hmm.
had, I'm like, guaranteed these are all the qualities that you already have. Like
Mm-hmm.
nothing you
Mm-hmm.
described to me was like rock star status, like
Mm-hmm.
being present with my clients, being able to deliver the
Mm-hmm.
results
True.
for them,
Mm-hmm.
like those are standard things,
Yeah.
like norm of like I am a
Mm-hmm.
good practitioner of this type of work,
Right.
right? So this, I think, for you extends much deeper in that all of my worth
Mm-hmm.
is external. It is
Mm-hmm.
within the confines of having the other succeed, even though logically I know I can facilitate, I can point to the direction that they need to move, but it's their journey that they need to walk on that
Right.
ultimately
Mm-hmm.
determines the results.
Mm-hmm.
So logically understand that emotionally, it is my worth that's tied to their result.
Mm-hmm.
And I can excel when the external is already lined up for me, meaning in all of these settings that you have grown up in and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like made yourself in, those
Mm-hmm.
are all predefined constraints, predefined constructs that you can excel in because the rules are like they're already set. If I
Mm-hmm.
do this and if I work hard and if I do like,
Mm-hmm.
then I can show that I'm the best in here.
Mm-hmm.
What is trying to merge through you now is
Mm-hmm.
the exact opposite, where you are the one responsible for setting your own constraints. You are the
Mm-hmm.
one responsible owning, communicating, and receiving that same value.
Mm-hmm.
So you are basically at the helm of your own ship.
Mm-hmm.
The funny thing about that is you've spent a career excelling in settings where your value can
Mm-hmm.
be masked by the externals. I have these
Mm-hmm.
criteria, I have these things that I'm checking off. Those are all of my value criteria. I am doing good. I am worthy. I am okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, those are all gone. And you're
Mm-hmm.
faced with really what was underlying the whole thing to really push forward to excel, which
Mm-hmm.
is to try and get significant, to try and get value from the other. What is emerging from your life right now is really, I am the one that can set my own significance, honor my own
Mm-hmm.
significance,
Mm-hmm.
be my own significance, and really take
Mm-hmm.
ownership, not just
Mm-hmm.
intellectually, but embodied through
Mm-hmm.
actions,
Mm-hmm.
through
Mm-hmm.
evidence that, like, I am actually good enough, I am worthy, I am deserving,
Mm-hmm.
and I
Mm-hmm.
do want to receive. So,
Mm-hmm.
what's coming up for you as I share that?
Um, I think I'm slightly amazed at being pegged so rapidly. And but no, I think it's very accurate. And the people that I follow and that I admire, and I am a certified Daring Way facilitator based on the work of Brene Brown, and really embody a lot of what she stands for about being able to be authentically imperfect and to own your worth and to stand in that value, and to make mistakes and to still wholeheartedly live your life and thrive. And I think when I look at the people that I admire, is I know I embody those same qualities. And I know, not Brene Brown, I'm not Brene Brown status. Please don't misunderstand anyone listening. But like, I know I embody that. It's just getting over, it's like a glass wall that I can see. You've got all these skills, you've got all these abilities, you can get to that next level, you can get through that glass wall, but you can see it, but it's not breaking, if that analogy makes sense. It's like, so, I'm there. It's just that there's this one barrier for whatever reason that is just kind of keeping me, to use some of Brene Brown's language, just keeping me small instead of entering that arena and like being able to say, hey, yeah, this is my fee. And I own that fee, and I'm going to give you the best service I possibly can. I'm not a miracle worker. There's no magic wands, but I'm going to work just as hard as you are. And if we're not a good fit, I'll refer you to somebody else with a different fee or whatever that case may be. There's that glass wall.
So what if it wasn't a glass wall, but it was actually a choice?
Then I would want to choose to step on the other side.
Is that true?
Yeah, I think at this point in my life and career, I think if you and I would have met a year ago, the answer would be no. I think at this point in my career and in my life, the answer is hell yes. Because that's just the point that I'm at, of it's time to pivot and make some big changes for many reasons, and to really want to be in that space without the doubt, feeling like an imposter, feeling like you're not measuring up, that not enoughness. So at this point, absolutely, I would want to be there.
Yeah. So I 100% feel the desire for that, the readiness to have this more impactful and empowered experience. I think that is 110% there. From the outside looking in, I think the part that's missing is the embodiment of the choice, right? Because even when I asked you, okay, is that a ceiling or is that a choice? It took some processing for you to realize the inherent choice, right? Because the awareness of the problem came from you. Like, you are extremely astute as like, I get the issues. I can see how they interplay. I get it. So that's not really at the crux of the issue. It's what I see in front of me. I have bought into the narrative that this is a glass ceiling. It's a block that I need to break through. Meanwhile, the whole time realizing or not realizing that it wasn't a glass ceiling at all. It was just, I stopped. I stopped here and I planted myself into it, looking for the glass ceiling that wasn't really there. But it's scary to take that embodied step forward into this space. Right. And I think there's a lot of unpacking for you to do, not cognitively, because you're very, very strong there, both in terms of awareness, both in terms of articulation, like all the things. But the embodiment of what it means for you to step into that, to find like somatic safety in playing in that field, to discern what does it mean about you to actually be in this space, to be seen by colleagues, by other people in this space, charging these rates, receiving the inevitable no's you are going to receive by charging more. The totality of all of that, I think, is right now, as far as like your embodied sense, maybe a little bit too much, but the desire is 110% there. So I think it's
Right.
like you're in that precipice space
Right.
right now. So how does that land for you?
I think no, I think it lands correctly. I think that without going into much depth, that I think circumstances in life have kind of, and I know this is an excuse, but there's also some truth to it too, have kind of forced me to play it safe. And I'm at a position now with an adult launch child. I'm at a position now with flexibility and time and just a few limitations that now it's my time to take that step, because if there are limitations, they're self-imposed. Like, all the excuses are gone. I can blame my two dogs, but that's all I have left to blame if I'm not going to take that step. So I think that, yes, I think you're correct. I think I've kind of used some life circumstances as excuses to play it safe. But there was also some reality in that too, of needing to play it safe, given some circumstances. So, but there's no more circumstances there.
Yeah, and that's a
And
beautiful spot to be in, right? Like I recognize where I was a victim. I'm now choosing not to be, and I can move forward.
totally,
So
yeah.
absolutely. So, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I know there's again a lot to unpack here, and there's obviously
Mm-hmm.
deeper
Mm-hmm.
areas that we can go into. But in terms of like just kind of the container for today and kind of
Uh-huh.
being here, like, does this feel complete for you? Or is there still something left outstanding?
No, I think it feels complete. It feels like it summarized a lot of some extraneous pieces that I know have been looming. And like you said, I have insight and awareness, but I think it was able to put it into one space that makes it a lot easier to take a look at and say, okay, like, are you willing to stay in that space? Or is it time to leave that space, instead of, well, I have this space and that space and this space and that space. I think it was able to kind of put it in that one container of saying, like, okay, it's all in a container. Now you have a choice. Like, and what are you going to choose?
Beautiful. So, I mean, I always ask people to kind of summarize their biggest like
Mm-hmm.
takeaways and
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
realizations from here. So,
Mm-hmm.
if that
Mm-hmm.
was it, you're welcome to say that was it. If there's something more you want to add, floor is yours for that.
I think that was the main one. I think that you touched on some, as much as that is the main takeaway, I think there are some underlying layers that I have allowed to fester that aren't necessarily diagnostic or clinical, or like so deep seated they can't change. But I think, and just throughout those conversations, some of those, okay, ouch, that hurt, like, but it was true, because there were those things that have been left to fester that really need to be cleaned up.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's a great spot to be in as far like it's not pretty to receive it. I know I've been
Totally.
on both
Yeah.
ends. It's
Yeah.
funner on
Uh-huh.
this side, 100% guaranteed.
I'm sure. Yeah.
But yeah, I've been on both sides, so I get it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So perfect. In that case, why don't you just close this off and let everybody know where to find you, who's the best person to find you. Floor is yours for that.
Absolutely. Well, you can find me at melissarussiano.com is my main clinical site. I'm also on Instagram at Melissa Russiano Therapy. And also, for anybody interested in coaching for burnout, imposter syndrome, perfectionism, at Never Give Up Coaching, which is also under the name Tabu Soro, which in Fijian means never give up. And I strongly believe that's a motto I live by, and encourage everybody else to just keep trying one step at a time. And if there's anything I can help them with, to feel free to reach out.
Beautiful. Well, as always, we'll include that in the show notes.
Okay.
So Melissa, thank you very much for being on. And
Thank
for everybody
you.
else listening, I will do my post episode recap right after this. Otherwise, we will see you on the next one.